Hey, Lake Point, Pastor Michael here to get you caught up on the 7th week of our series, Thriving in Babylon. Over the past 300 years, and especially over the past 3 decades, Canadian culture has dramatically changed. It's shifted from a Christianized culture, shaped by a Judeo-Christian worldview, to a post-Christian culture, a modern-day Babylon, where the values of our dominant society run alien, sometimes even hostile, to the way of Jesus. And so the book of Daniel is acting as our guide, mentoring us on how to navigate this new terrain. And what's interesting is that the book of Daniel is split right down the middle. The first half is stories about life in exile. The second half is all about life after exile, and it is steeped in prophecy. What we see in Daniel chapter 7 is that Daniel has a dream, and in his dream, he describes 4 beasts that we know to represent 4 empires. The first thing Daniel sees in his dream is the 4 winds of heaven churning up the great sea. Now, in the ancient Near East, the sea was symbolic of chaos and anarchy and evil and all that's wrong with the world, and all that is a threat to what is good and beautiful and true. In fact, in Babylonian culture, the sea was deified as a dark, malevolent spiritual being. And so, out of the sea, Daniel sees these 4 beasts. Now, as you'll notice, they're not animals. They're animal-like, however, they're kind of these mutant monster-like variations. And the imagery here is designed to evoke terror and fear. I mean, think of it like an ancient version of a Goosebumps book. And so as most scholars see it, the imagery operates on 2 levels. On one level, the 4 beasts are symbolic of 4 empires that existed around the time of Daniel. Those 4 empires being Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And so the first beast is described to be like a lion with the wings of an eagle, which has Babylon written all over it. This was commonly used Babylonian imagery. The second beast is like a bear with 3 ribs in its mouth. And the imagery implies that the bear just ate, but it's still hungry. And this represents Medo-Persia. The Medo-Persian Empire, which conquered Babylon, ate or conquered not only Babylon, but 2 other empires as well, Egypt and Lydia. But it's still hungry, it's still thirsty, it's still out for blood. The third beast is described like a leopard and also a bird, meaning that it's fast. And the Greek Empire, which conquered the Medo-Persian Empire under Alexander the Great, conquered most of the known world, from Europe all the way to India, and it did it fast in like a little over a decade. And in the imagery, we also read that it has 4 heads. What's that all about? Well, when Alexander died, he actually had no heirs, and so the empire was divided up into 4 parts based on his top 4 generals. Then you have the last beast, and it's kind of the craziest one. It's the closest thing to sci-fi in the Bible. It's animal-like, but we read it has these large iron teeth. And so it's just some kind of biomechanical robotic terror. And most scholars think this is a nod to the Roman Empire, and the 10 horns are a nod to the line of the 10 Roman empires. And so on one level, this is symbolic of 4 flesh and blood empires in the ancient world. But on another level, it's symbolic of all empires throughout human history. Empires that are beastly, that trample the poor, that devour those on the margins, that are at war with the people of God. Now, when we read this, we're like, okay, this isn't a dream, this is a nightmare. But don't fret, it gets better. Allow me to read to you Daniel chapter 7, starting in verse 9. It says this, that as I looked, thrones were set in place in the ancient days, which is another name for God, took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow, the hair of his head was white like wool, his throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was flowing, coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were opened. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking. I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts, the other empires, had been stripped of their authority but were allowed to live for a period of time. And so, in the second half of the dream, Daniel sees not only to the earth, but into heaven itself, into the throne room of the King of the universe, God himself. And it's filled with all this rich, evocative, apocalyptic imagery. And then we read this, that one of the most important sentences in the book of Daniel chapter 7, verse 13, it says, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was like a son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. And so Daniel sees a little bit deeper into the throne room of God, and he sees one like a son of man. The Aramaic phrase can be translated a human one or a human-like one that is coming on the clouds of heaven. Now, clouds all throughout the Old Testament are kind of stock Hebrew verbiage for an appearance of God. I mean, think of the cloud on top of Mount Sinai. That was actually God on top of Mount Sinai with Moses. Or the cloud over the tabernacle. That was actually God over the tabernacle. And so get this figure is kind of like a human being, but at the same time, he's an appearance of God. The Does that sound like anyone you know? Well, if it's not already obvious, check this out. Verse 14, he, the Son of Man, was given authority, glory, and sovereign power over all nations and peoples of every language worshipped him. His dominion, his rule and reign is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Unlike Rome or Greece or the Babylonian Empire before that, his kingdom, not his empire, his kingdom will never be destroyed. The Son of Man will rule and reign forever. Who's this prophecy about? Jesus. If you read the four Gospels, you know that Jesus' favorite name for himself was the Son of Man. That was kind of his self-moniker, his self-identity. And so where's he getting that from? Well, he's getting that from right here in Daniel chapter 7. And now you also know why the Jewish authorities had him killed. To claim you're the Son of Man, that you're a human-like appearance of God, that's a bold claim. Now what happens next is in chapter 7 is that Daniel is troubled in spirit, he's disturbed by his dreams, and so he asks for help in understanding them. And after it's explained to him, we read that he's still deeply troubled. Why? Well, we don't really know, but if I had to guess, it's because he wants it all to happen right now. Like he wants the kingdom of God to come right now. He's been awakened to this new reality, but it's still a long way off. It will come, but it will come way down the line in the future. In the meantime, empires, plural, will rise and fall. Yet one day the Son of Man will establish his everlasting kingdom here on earth, and all the empires will be no more. What we see in Daniel 7 is that this dream is all about living in the shadow of the empire. And really, empire is a theme found all throughout the scriptures, which means whether you like it or not, it's something that as a follower of Jesus, you and I need to wrestle with. And so the first question we need to tackle is, what constitutes an empire? Well, the theologian John Dominic Crossan provides us with 4 markers we need to consider. First, military. An empire not only has a military, it often commands the best military in the world. Better soldiers, better weapons, better funding, better strategy. Plus, what's more is that empire has trust in its military for its safety and security. The second marker of empire is economic. An empire is an engine that drives the world's economy forward. It's people's trust in its markets for their peace and prosperity. Third is political. An empire has a way of organizing the power structures that run society. Its emperor or its president or its prime minister plays more than a leadership role or a celebrity role. They play the role of a pseudo-god. An empire places trust in its particular form of government, believing it to be superior to all others. And fourth, ideology. An empire uses a shared narrative about the good life in order to control and conform. It has to get you to do its bidding through law and through culture. The empire needs you to fit into the image it creates, to behave and think the way it wants you to. And if you refuse to be controlled or conform, you get in trouble. The reality is, we are all formed by empire. We're all formed by the culture that we grow up in and the culture we live in, the culture we eat in and sleep in and work in. For better or for worse, we're all being formed, which is why it's so important that we recognize empire for what it is, because as Christians, more than anything, we need to be formed by the kingdom of God. And so, here's some helpful, or hopefully helpful, thoughts on empires. First, America is an empire. And yes, I realize we're Canadian, but let's not kid ourselves. Our closest allies, our neighbors to the south, deeply influence us. I'd argue in many ways Canada is simply an extension of the American empire. If you look at the 4 markers of an empire, military, economic, political, and ideology, it becomes pretty clear. America is an empire. It fits the definition. Why does that matter though? Well, it matters because we need to be able to draw a clear line of demarcation between the Empire of America and the Kingdom of God. The myth of America or Canada as a Christian nation is dangerous. Why? Because it blinds us to the beastly side of our countries. There's a lot that's great about Canada. There's a lot that's great about America. But there's also a beastly side. There's a lot that doesn't actually align with the values and priorities of God. Now, we don't have time to unpack them all in this recap, but in the main sermon, I talk about how there's a difference of trusts, a difference in aims, a difference of scopes, and a difference of battles. Now, the second thing you should know about empires is that empires are a mixed bag of good and bad. We read the Bible and it's easy to come off with a negative view of empire and a negative view of Babylon or Greece or Rome, because the Bible, for the most part, was written from underneath the boot of the empire. However, I wager the Bible would sound very different if it was written by a Babylonian or a Greek or a Roman. The thing is, there's a lot of good and bad in every empire. Canada has its fair share of issues, but I think most of us would agree that it's 1,000 times better than, say, Nazi Germany or Stalin's Russia or North Korea. And if it wasn't obvious already, here's the thing I want to make clear. We have a dual citizenship. We are both citizens of Canada and the Kingdom of God. And our job is to celebrate that all that is good and beautiful and true in Canada and its way of life, while at the same time living as a witness to the even better reality of the Kingdom of God. All right, thought number 3, empires come and go. In Daniel's dream, one beast is conquered by another, is conquered by another, is conquered by another, and right on down the list. Truth is, God is sovereign over the rise and the fall of empires. And based on the story of the Bible, what we see is that God's hand is on human history, working with and at times against human and spiritual characters in the story to slowly but surely bring about the kingdom of God. So on that note, here's the 4th and final thought on empires. In the end, God will judge the empires of the world and set up his kingdom here on earth. And that is good news. And like Daniel, we wish it was now. But alas, it seems that more empires are set to rise and fall. The pattern of history will continue. But in the meantime, as Nate shared back in week 1, and as the prophet Jeremiah puts it, our job is to seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have called you. That's our job. As we find ourselves living in an empire, and as we find ourselves maintaining a dual citizenship, we're to seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which he has called us. So, how do we do that? 3 things really quickly. We become artists. Artists do 2 things. They critique the bad in society, but they also call it the good. So, we need to be artists. Good artists help people to imagine a better future. They catalyze the mind's eye to a new reality. They help people see not only what is, but what could be. Second, we need to be citizens. We need to live out our dual citizenship. We need to be good citizens of Leamington, Ontario, and of the Kingdom of God. This city should be a better place because you are in it. Then third, we need to be philosophers. Philo is just Greek for love. A philosopher is someone who loves wisdom. And we need philosophers more now than ever because our culture is desperately lacking wisdom. We have a lot of educated, smart, successful people who lack wisdom. People who don't know how to parent, people who don't know how to stay in a marriage, people who don't know how to manage money or their sex drive or really any of that stuff. We need wisdom more than ever before. In order to seek the peace and prosperity of our city, we need to be artists, we need to be citizens, and we need to be philosophers. Well, friends, thanks for listening. Enjoy jumping into discussion questions. I'll see you next time.